So, okay. So, yeah, Tuesday, you get the pizza Tuesday. It's sitting on the counter. You're like, one more slice. Oh, I ate like 2/3 of it. Now I'm really full. Are you like looking for like that last piece before bed? Or are you like, this goes in the fridge?
Oh, for me, it's just forgetting to put it away. It's how I ate, and then I'm watching TV, and I forgot to put the pizza away. I find it an hour later. I put it away. That's what it is.
Yeah, see, for us, and by us, I'm really referring to my wife. It's about leaving it on the counter because she believes that it's safe to do so for extended periods of time, so that you can have like some walking snacks as you walk past it. The other thing is,
But is it better for the pizza
for
though?
hours?
I feel like it dries out on the counter faster than it does in the fridge.
Definitely not true.
You don't agree with that?
No, fridges outside of the drawers dry everything out. So
because of the circulation of the air.
yeah, so unless you wrap it up in foil or something like that. If you put it
you got to keep it on the foil.
I put it in a box. A lot of times I just throw the pizza in there in a box. That's not doing anything for air circulation.
Yeah,
Dave.
You mean it's not preventing?
It's not preventing it. Correct.
Yeah, I mean it's hesitating it
for hours. If it weren't me, it just would never go in the fridge. It would live on the countertop until it was fully consumed.
Yeah. Well, you really shouldn't do that either. I would say
I agree.
I would say you start.
Yeah, there's water activity in that cheese.
Number one, I would say there's definitely a riskier not about this, where they talk about how long you can have a piece of pizza out before you have to be worried about it. I've definitely thrown a pizza into the fridge 4 or 5 hours later after forgetting that it was there and then being like, I don't want to waste this pizza that I got. I'm going to throw it in the fridge and it's just cheese. That's fine.
It's also like, it's so salty and they're not organic. So I think like the preservatives help a little bit.
This is our coolest cold open yet.
Hello and welcome to episode 179 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps. Shane.
Stanislav.
Blue shirt, white dots. Looking great.
It's more like, it's like white. What are these? Like little symbols. There's like X's and carrots, but not like the carrots you eat.
And a skull. And water drop and a sun.
And Daisy Duck on the back. Like, you remember that era of like weird Warner Brothers, like where everyone had it was Attitude Era of Warner Brothers? Sure. much like us last week.
Taz.
Like Taz, like angry Tweety giving you a real stink eye.
Mm-hmm.
You mean with like the gangsta clothes era?
Yeah,
of Looney
exactly.
Tunes that basically inspired Space Jam.
Yeah, like the crisscross era of Looney Tunes.
Sure. I mean, you couldn't avoid it. And I have a family member who still kind of wears that stuff every time I see them. And it's been 30 years. Well, we don't need to talk about that.
Okay. Stanislav, I was going to comment about your hat, but I feel like this, it's an audio medium. I don't know who these people are on your cap. Are those aren't those baseball owners?
My new hobby is collecting hats from various American law firms.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so this is my EBG hat.
Mm-hmm.
EBG sponsor our show.
Get at us.
I thought maybe they were all roles that Ted Danson had played in different shows.
The B is Becker. That show is fine.
You're giving a lot away right now.
Doxing Stan.
Yeah. Dave, also, hello. The Godfather, you're here.
I'm here somehow.
How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm doing good. There's a lot of chaos around my house right now.
When isn't it though? Really?
Because I accidentally have COVID.
Dave.
And
man,
Shane owes me $5 now.
Came for one of us, and it was Dave.
Yeah. And so we've exiled my kids to another house to be able to try to keep them from catching it. And so far that's working. I don't have a lot of symptoms. I'm hoping that I start testing negative soon, but right now things are weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
But everybody's doing okay. So that's good.
Thank goodness for vaccines, right?
That's what I'm saying.
It's not hitting you too hard.
I know a lot of people who are sick right now. That's all I can say. There were a couple of big events here in Chicago, but I feel like I know a lot of people who are sick right now. So be careful out there, people.
Now, Dave, is it true you got sick playing Magic?
I did. Yeah, I think so. I do think so.
We have like photographic evidence of the exact time
That
in which
someone
it
coughed in
transferred.
Dave's mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're doing okay, Dave. I hope that your family is reunited soon. And again, yeah, I'm just reminded that you need to wear masks more often than not. I don't want to get sick.
And the other important reminder for Dave especially, never play Elder Dragon Highlander.
Yeah. I got sick playing Commander, you guys.
Oh God, it's not worth it.
Can you believe that?
It's just these multiplayer tables. Like, a game of Magic should not include more than one opponent.
I mean, I agree. I just got talked into it by some friends. And yeah, there you are.
Some friends. Stan, what are we doing this week? This is like the longest open we've had. We're trying to keep these episodes shorter, and we do a 9-minute pre-roll.
That's right. This week we are trying to, take some baby steps into a new era of the dive down. Nothing too drastic, but longtime listeners will know that our shows go on for a long time. We're a 2-hour podcast usually, and it's getting harder and harder to keep that going. So unofficially, but in the back of our heads, we're trying to expedite these shows a little bit, make them a bit shorter. We love talking to one another, and it's becoming a problem.
It really is.
I mean, we try to do too much, right? Like, we want to do like a thorough breakdown on something, whether it's like an actual paper event or like even a couple challenges, and then do something worthwhile in the dive down. And we get stretched pretty thin. And like, we're thinking that these episodes might be too long for some of you out there. They might be too long for us just to prepare and record every week. So what I think we decided on, and I'm just going to speak for all of us, is we're just not going to have a breakdown sometimes. Like, if the event doesn't call for it, or like the dive down topic seems like it's something we want to focus more fully on, that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more along the lines of we're going to have some episodes that are just breakdowns where we talk about the
NRG one
meta
last week.
Exactly. And then we're going to have some episodes where we just do a topic. But we're going to do less episodes where we try to do both a tournament and a topic. And I'm so sorry for that, but I think that I agree with what everybody's saying. We go deep too often. We think that these things are going to be fast, and then we talk forever about these.
You may cut like a page of notes.
I've got some stats for you here. I got some stats for people who want to know about the total number of episodes that we've released, including bonus episodes, is 197 episodes of the Dive Down. 197. This is episode 179. In that time, we have put out 338 hours and 22 minutes of content.
So what's the average?
Is that a lot or a little?
The average is 1 hour and 43 minutes, and that's including bonus episodes that actually are generally an hour. So we literally have no regular shows that are below 110 minutes or so. Looking at it, they're very infrequent.
Besides the beginning, when like somehow we were able to keep our mouths shut now and then.
Yeah.
I would say the regular shows are basically between 105 and 115 minutes, which is 2 hours. It's basically 2 hours. Not an hour 5, 105.
Yeah, 105. So I guess what that means is, we're not going to be doing any kind of like separate episodes or anything like that. And I think the podcast is going to remain mostly the same, but we just wanted to give you a heads up on like this slight content shift that we're testing out and likely will prove more permanent, just to see how it works for us, works for you. If we feel like we're leaving something on the table, then we'll address it.
Yes. And at the end of the day, we're testing to make sure that this helps make the show actually better, rather than thinking that we need to squeeze more into the shows to make them good. We think being a little bit more concise will do us good and the listeners good as well.
Yeah.
But what's the actual topic of this show, Stanislav?
This episode is 10 hot takes about Magic the Gathering now and forever. Do we actually have 10 takes?
I think there's 10. There's 10 bullet points.
There's 10.
But some of them have some bullets.
There's 10 topics. This is a smorgasbord episode. We got a lot of things, little things we want to talk about.
And big things.
One of them actually
10
includes
reasonable takes.
Yeah. One of them even includes kind of a breakdown. So if you're really upset about us not covering an event, it's coming. Don't worry.
Yeah. This was going to be my breakdown. Now it's just a bullet point in the dive down.
So that's right. We're going to talk about 10 topics, including cards, including decks, including formats, including tournaments, everything in between. You're going to love it. I'm not even going to tease what some of them are beyond what I just said. But but you can look at the show notes to get timestamps and get a sense for them that way.
Oh, yeah, we spoil ourselves, don't we?
Before we jump into it, let's do some quick housekeeping. We got 3 new patrons this week. Anders B., Dane S., and Kyle A. Thank you all for joining the nation, as well as Will C. of Barrister and Man, whom you all have heard about frequently now. Will C. went up a tier. For some reason, giving us more money. Thank you, Will.
We'll take it.
Thank you, Will, for the products and the support. We'll talk more about Barrister and Man a little bit later. And we even got a couple new reviews.
I love new reviews.
These are hilarious reviews to me. Can we start with the second one, please?
Do it.
So the second review we got from Max D in the United States. 5 stars. The subject is great listen, and it says, always listening on my dog walks. I don't even play Modern and Pioneer, but I can't get enough of the host chemistry. Always makes me laugh and makes my dogs laugh.
If we make one dog laugh, the entire podcast was worth it.
We've made more than one dog laugh in these 338 hours. I'm positive about that.
And we also have a review from Rosie the goalie in Canada. It's perfect. And, I think hockey's popular up there, I've heard. Thanks for liking our voice. Listening on the way to school and work and to sleep. Just lull. I think your voice, Dave, is the smooth, sultry voice that lulls people to sleep. Much like Saffron Olive.
The subject of this review is MTG meets ASMR. As someone who also listens to podcasts to fall asleep, I appreciate it. I could never imagine listening to myself doing that, but I certainly appreciate how important that can be for people getting their rest at bedtime. So thank you very much.
I've definitely fallen asleep listening to you, Dave. Stan mentioned the Patreon. We have new citizens of the Dive Down Nation. If you'd like to join the nation, get your papers, get that passport stamped, head on over to patreon.com/thedivedown. You can get access to the Discord for $1. You get access to cooler stuff up some tiers. I just sent out about 20 packages. I've got about 20 more going out as soon as we get some more copies of the card, the Dive Down, in. And then I think we'll be caught up. So I apologize for the delay in getting the swag out, but I'm hopeful that soon everyone's going to have what they paid for and what they're hoping to get, and I'm amped to get that all out. We'll have the deck boxes coming soon. Stan is the holder of all of our awesome playmats that Dave designed. If you're at 3 weeks for $8, you get a custom Patreon-only, citizen-only playmat that will never be sold outside of the Patreon. We have, like we mentioned, the deck boxes that are 3 weeks at $5, something like that. And if you ever are at $5, you don't have to be there forever. Then you can get that, all that kind of cool stuff. We appreciate all of you in the nation. And if you'd like to keep us going, then head on over to patreon.com/thedivedown.
Sweet. So, gentlemen, we've been playing a lot of Magic. We've been buying cards.
ViaManaTraders.com.
That's right. Mana Traders makes it possible for us to do these episodes each and every week. We want to talk about some of our experiences across formats, both in testing and maybe even as consumers of Magic cards.
We're just trying to have some summer fun right now. And I think we're going to start with some thoughts on Pioneer. What's going on in Pioneer right now?
Oh, sure. We're going to jump all over the place. This isn't going to be the only Pioneer topic. This is just the first Pioneer topic.
Yeah, although there are modern topics coming and other topics as well. But Shane, why don't we dive in with your first thought?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's translate some of these playing experiences and some points of conversation, which is what I exist for, to talk to you two about Magic and complain. And this is actually not a complaint, but the first point of conversation, I think, is all about expressive iteration. And I think the fundamental is that it's hard to replace in Pioneer, but maybe not impossible to replace in Pioneer. So first off, let's talk about perhaps, is it prowess? Would you like to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say there's no replacing a card as good as expressive iteration.
No, there's not.
It was in so many decks. Did so many different things. Does as much almost in Modern as it does in Pioneer. But we do think we have stuff to say about all the Izzet decks that used to be playing expressive iteration in Pioneer at least, and have some words of consolation for the people who like those decks.
Really, there's just no replacing Heartbreak. Anyone who had their first boyfriend or girlfriend in high school or college that inevitably ended perhaps. You know what it's like to long for something as meaningful to you as a card like Expressive Iteration. That's what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. I think you were a bit more heartbroken about this than the rest of us.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I was surprised that the card got banned, but then I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I was heartbroken is because, like, the only thing I liked doing in Pioneer involved casting Expressive Iteration.
Right. We're going to talk about that more later, too.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the deck that Dave and I had just been getting into, and that's Is It Prowess. And the long and short of my point is Reckless Impulse isn't Expressive Iteration, but does that always matter? And I think in this deck, it kind of depends. But what I did is I play tested a recent winning Is It Prowess list that essentially just replaced Expressive Iteration with Reckless Impulse, which seems to be kind of the general concept of these lists since the banning of EI. And if you don't remember, Reckless Impulse is from Crimson Vow, and it's just a 1 in a red sorcery. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. And you may remember that we thought this card had some appeal. It's effectively just to light up the stage. That's always 1 in a red. It can never be R. It can never be 2R. It's just splitting the difference. And medium floor, potentially medium high ceiling, right?
Yeah. And I've certainly spent some time playing this card, but I've mostly played it in Modern, actually, because it still gets some space in the Boros Prowess list that I have tried in the past, and that kind of stuff as well. But
so I think in this deck, in Is It Prowess, like it's doing what you want, right? Like I think you want to trigger Prowess before combat. You want to connive off of your Ledger Shredder pre-combat, and then as you progress into the mid and late game, it's giving you a spell trigger, letting you see a couple cards that you can work with how and when you need. But I mean, of course, there's effectively no benefit to this card over Expressive Iteration besides like the really loose potential that you just are stuck on blue mana, and you can cast this if you have 2 red. You only see 2 cards, you don't see 3. One thing I think is a bit kind of appreciated is that your opponent sees both cards instead of just one. So like they have more information about what you can cast. So you can't surprise them with like some kind of interaction from hand or like a prowess trigger out of your hand or something like that. And
the other thing is you get access to the cards for longer. So with Expressive Iteration, the exile card, you have to cast that turn or lose it. With Reckless Impulse, you get to cast it, can cast one of the spells, and then have access to the other spell on subsequent turns. Now, I would never say that it's better. It's not as efficient a card as Expressive Iteration is. But that is something to keep in mind when you're playing it, as you have additional time to use them.
That's a good point. Didn't think about that.
It makes it a little better on turn 2.
You can cast it on turn 2, and if you have to for some reason, you can cast it on turn 3 more easily and not worry about losing both of the cards. You can have access to one and then go for it from there.
Right on. And in Is It Prowess, I found the card plenty useful. Like it dragged me to some wins versus decks like Azorius Control that I don't think I would have won otherwise. Of course, I did draw 12 cards off of 4 Treasure Cruises that match. I guess Ancestral Recall can be okay. So Dave or Stan, have any of you been touching like Is It Prowess or Prowessy decks that are trying to slot in this card?
Not in Pioneer since this happened, no.
Word. What are your experiences with it in Modern, Dave? Like, what do you think about it since we are talking about the card right now?
I think it's a totally good tool in Modern. It's something that is worth the mana. Mickey from our Discord and I had a long conversation about it when it came out, about what's better, light up the stage or this or whatever. I think it depends on the shell a lot. And I think that in a deck where you want access to this effect, sometimes in Modern right now, it's best to just play both of them. You play 4 Reckless Impulse and 4 Light Up the Stage and just really lean into the card draw, basically. Yeah. I think it's a card that's totally okay in Modern as a piece. It's not going to be in a ton of decks, but I think it's a useful tool to have access to. And I'm thrilled that that it's potentially enough to make Is It Prowess still good.
Yeah, for sure. But there are more Is It decks that got touched and affected by the expressive iteration ban, and those are Is It Control and Is It Phoenix. And Stan, you're kind of our Is It Control player. What have you been thinking about?
Yeah, so my first inclination there was just to see if I could one for one replace expressive iteration with some card. Just like take those 4 slots and replace them with another card draw spell. And the card that I was testing out at first was Frantic Inventory. You guys remember this card, Frantic Inventory?
Yeah, it's a classic, right? It's like draws a card for each one that's in your graveyard type thing.
Yes, it's a reprint. It's a twist on a card called Ancestral Knowledge. It's an Ancestral Knowledge effect.
That's right. This is an instant for 1 and a blue. Draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Frantic Inventory in your graveyard. And I tested it for the obvious reason of like, it's just another card draw that scales pretty well, especially later in the game, if you're finding a lot of them, and could potentially scale well in games where you're getting through your deck very frequently, which there's a control piles were good at to begin with because they're already playing 4 opt and 4 consider.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The card's actually called Accumulated Knowledge. My bad. It's not Ancestral Knowledge. I'm sorry. Take away my old Magic player card.
Yeah, you accumulate the knowledge, Dave.
Yes.
In your graveyard.
Yes.
Apology accepted. I gotta tell you, I was within a league. I realized that Frantic Inventory ain't it.
It's not the truth.
Not the truth, but I learned a lot, not only about it, but I actually feel like I learned a lot about expressive iteration in the process too. So, the appeals of Frantic Inventory is that it's instant speed. You can play it on turn 2, and it scales, but that scaling isn't as consistent. Like, iteration always does the same thing, and even though iteration gets better the later you play it, you don't necessarily need to play multiple iteration for the first one to be decent. And the first Frantic Inventory is just like
low floor.
Yeah, you don't feel good. You only feel good about the first one if you're already holding the second one. But even then,
or if you've discarded the true first one.
Yeah, and the Is It Control decks don't really have Ledger Shredder or any other things to make discarding it easy.
I just think that card has been on the bubble for a long time. People have wanted to be good. They've wanted to be good in Pioneer. I just think it's not at the rate where it's really handy, unfortunately.
Stan, I've been seeing people running like literal Anticipate.
Yeah.
Like look at 3, draw 1, and put the rest of the bottom of your library for like 1 and a blue, which seems like just not a replacement.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets to the thing I hinted at about learning more about why iteration was so powerful and really so important. And the thing that I really unlocked was something that Todd Anderson said on what I think was the most recent MTG Rants episode, which is the thing that made iteration so powerful is that it just made sure you always hit your land drops. And having a spell that's not only getting you through your deck, but also making sure that your resources are sound is just essentially unprecedented. The closest things we see to that are what you were talking about with Reckless Impulse and to some extent Light Up the Stage, but those require setup, right? So I kind of got to the point where it's like, if I'm trying to replace Expressive Iteration, I think 2 of those 4 cards should just be lands. So that you're drawing those lands naturally more frequently and you're hitting your land drops. What's good, though, about this theory, I think, is that lands are so good now that they can also be utility lands. So if you're flooding out a little bit, like it could be, a land that has an effect either on the board or, does something else meaningful.
Yeah. How many lands does Is It Control run? Like before, do you remember how many it ran before when iteration was there?
I think it was down to 22.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it was between 21 and 23, and I think it was on the lower end. And I got to the point where I was just playing like 23 or 24.
Yeah. I think that makes a ton of sense. Just, having enough lands in a control deck is huge. And like you said, you can run a Otawara and a Soken Zen, and then there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And the last point I wanted to make is like, you don't necessarily have to replace those cantrips with other cantrips. You can replace them with other interactive spells as well. And that's one of the other things that makes Is It Control so appealing, is that it can have a flexible interaction suite to deal with different metagame forces. Right now, it's got a lot of really good red burn-based removal spells. So I just got to the point where I'm playing Thing in the Ice and Narset with 2 extra lands and 2 extra Spell Pierce. So I could actually interact with the stack a little bit better than it was already capable of doing, since it was running no main deck counterspells prior.
Yeah, I think it's slightly important to remember that even in an Izzet-based control deck, it's not like you need to be cantripping through your deck just to find cards. Like, remember when Faithful Mending came out and everyone, or that was previewed, and everyone was like, this is just going to be an Azorius control because like it gains life and gives you like card selection and stuff like that. And it's just so easy to run, and like that never happened.
Yeah.
Because like you don't just need to dig through your deck because you're a control deck. You have to have you typically want to have some reason to be playing a cantrip like that. Like whether it's just a cheap spell to trigger, is it like Phoenix or something like that? So, and speaking of Izzet Phoenix.
Right. Speaking of a deck that does want to cantrip through its deck, let's talk about Phoenix. So I've actually been playing some Phoenix lately. I don't know why. I do know why. So I saw that Sam Rolfe, known as Phil Hellmuth online, I think came in 9th in a Pioneer Challenge with a list the other day, and I was just like, looks sweet, let's try it out. So I loaded it up, and the big switch that's going on here, we talked about it a little bit last week, is that instead of expressive iteration, we're back to strategic planning as a 4 of, which is the take a look at 3, put 1 in your hand, put the other 2 in your graveyard. And I don't know, the deck felt sweet. It's been the first time in a while that I've tried to play Phoenix in Pioneer. I just really felt like, even though the deck is kind of nerfed at this point, it's still doing well. And Treasure Cruise is still awesome. You don't even have to run, you're only running 3 of those. Basically, Ledger Shredder is just such a good card, I think, as a secondary threat to Phoenix, that the deck feels really tight. And all you have to do is just draw through your deck, and eventually you get to your win cons. This deck is not really about aggroing out Phoenixes. It's not about that kind of thing. I think in some ways, pre-board less so, but post-board you can become kind of a mid-range deck almost, or a control deck. A lot of times these decks go to control, but this one is more got removal on the side and stuff like Fable the Mirror Breaker, as opposed to a bunch of extra control spells like Planeswalkers or something like that. And the deck just felt really good to me, and I like this list in particular because it has that more mid-range plan rather than a control plan. And a couple of cards that I was really impressed with, of course, strategic planning is fine. I think it's a good part of the engine, but the cards that are really awesome to me to play with are Fable the Mirror Breaker out of the side. I think is great. I accidentally actually registered a 62 card deck for the league that I'm in right now, where I'm playing 2 Fables.
And 13 sideboard cards?
Yeah, 13 sideboard cards, 2 Fables main, and it's actually felt great every time I drew Fable, and I'm like, maybe Fable should just be main and move something else to the side instead. Like, I don't know for sure. But that card has been fantastic. It's let me do things like be able to, draw into extra Phoenixes and discard them, have something that helps me ramp. If people have already used their removal on like Ledger Shredder, for example, or tried to kill some Phoenixes to buy some time, and then I go Fable, that's pretty nice. And then I had one great game the other night where somebody tapped out against me when I had the reflection of the Mirror Breaker on the board, and then I played a Crackling Drake. Then I Lava Axed their Graveyard Trespasser to have to get 3 cards in the yard, and I hit them for 19 with a copy of the Crackling Drake from my reflection, the Mirror Breaker, in one turn.
It's things like that make you want to play Magic, right?
I mean, that was a great moment for me. I was like, yes!
And I'm guessing the copy also draws a card, so you recouped some of the card disadvantage that happened from attacking or trying to remove the Trespasser.
Definitely, but I didn't care. You
just won on the spot. It didn't matter.
Well, yeah, exactly. My Crackling Drake. I was sitting there. My Crackling Drake in my hand had 14 power, and they were at 19 life, and I was like, okay, how can I get 5 more instants and sorceries into my graveyard and drop this and have enough mana? So I had to do some like negative value stuff at the end of their turn. Then when my turn came, got the extra 3 cards in, got it up there and swung in. It was fun. I'm enjoying Phoenix. It's not about turboing Phoenix's out. It's about kind of like controlling the board, getting Ledger Shredder up, trying to get some damage in, drawing a lot of cards, and then doing, then getting Phoenix out later. It's thinking about that way.
It's an inevitability deck, right?
Yeah. And also Galvanic Iteration has been amazing.
It's a bonkers card.
I mean, it's been wild to play Fork. Like, I can't remember. It's just Fork. Like, it's got Flashback. Like, that was a card that we thought was broken when I played, originally. And, we've gone up and down on how much a twin cast or whatever Reverberate is really worth. But having one that you can use and then use again when you have a bigger spell has been fantastic, especially to be able to draw 6 cards off a Treasure Cruise or take 2 turns off a Temporal Trespass. Like, that stuff is a real legit plan. So I don't know. I've been enjoying it. It was enough for me to go out and buy all the Pioneer lands that I needed to be able to have this deck, which I didn't have all the red blue lands yet. So
nice.
Loving Phoenix.
All right. Well, that definitely will be our longest, I think, of our 10 topics about Magic the Gathering. Let's head it into number 2, why don't we? And this is, again, mostly about Pioneer. And I think that my take is Mono Green Devotion is really good even without Nykthos. And everyone who plays Pioneer knows that this deck is like one of, if not the best in the format right now, and you have to have a game plan against it, or you have to be able to tech against it. And one of the most powerful cards, of course, is Nykthos, which can generate just a huge amount of mana. And what it does is it snowballs your existing board state into something that's unsurmountable. So it lets you press your advantage in a completely unique way.
So, the reason we're talking about the deck is fine even without Nykthos is for 2 reasons, right? One is Nykthos is not an explorer yet. And 2, sometimes you don't draw it.
Yeah, sometimes you don't draw it. And 3, it's potentially on the ban list. Or it's potentially on the ban watch list, right? And so I think people are just saying that Nykthos is likely one of the top cards on like the short list for future bans. And what I've been finding in my recent testing is like, unless the deck is teched to beat you, you're frequently just fine without having access to Nykthos. And look, I'm not saying that Nykthos isn't necessary or that the ban wouldn't hurt it, because that's an absurd take. But what I'm saying is that in this window of Pioneer, of the metagame, just ramping to big green spells and then having access to Karn is just a potent strategy, even without the ultra ramp of Nykthos.
Yeah, and mostly what you're saying is that the reason that that's good is because Winota isn't there to punish you for really dawdling around with ramping, essentially. Like,
yeah.
That's the takeaway, right?
Yeah, and I think there's some future bullet points where it's like, I think we're identifying more opportunities for closing this window. Like this window of the Pioneer metagame, I think, is closing quickly. Like, we're seeing stuff like Mono Blue Spirits that I know is a topic that we'll hit. That had 6 decks in the top 32 of the challenge on Saturday, which tied Mono Green Devotion with 6, and they both had 2 in the top 8. So this is something that I think is kind of gunning for Mono Green Devotion and other decks, of course. But like, the reason that I think this deck works is in Pioneer, you get access to 8 1-mana elves. You get hard to interact with ramp at 2 with like Sylvan Caryatid and Wolf Willow Haven. And you just are casting all of these powerful threats ahead of curve, which is always something you want to be doing. And I think Karn the Great Creator is just as powerful as ever, right? Like, you're just able to frustrate the opponent for as little as 0 mana with like a Tormod's Crypt or a God Pharaoh statue at 6. And when I was playing this weekend, I never had a single Nykthos in a bunch of games that I played and won. Like, and because the normal strategy was just so strong. It's just so good. Like, unless people are disrupting you or maybe having like a well-timed sweeper or something like that. So one of the things that felt really good, even like mulling to 5, was like against Rakdos, which is still a popular deck in the format. And it's just, you eventually just go over the top and you outvalue what they're doing at the same spot on the curve. Like, even your 4/4 for 3 is better than their 3/3 for 3. And just all that kind of stuff just adds up over time. And as you get to the point where you are getting to your giant collected company and getting 2-for-1s and things like that, they just sort of run out of the interaction they need to stop what you're doing. I just felt like I played against like an artifact based aggressive deck, which is not like some kind of top tier deck in the format. I remember that one because just like as soon as I get a Karn the Great Creator down, the game's essentially over because I have some kind of blockers and I have Karn and we're good to go.
Yeah. Because of his static or because of the value or both?
Because of the static, 100%. And then like, you're able to do stuff like against other mid-range decks where even if you're not casting a Storm the Festival, you just protect Karn and then you get a Skyboat and then you take care of all their X3s because again, everything they have is X3 and you're able to just eat it alive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. It's probably good for people to know when they're planning their strategies against this deck that it doesn't really hinge on destroying Nykthos or keeping them from generating extra mana from Nykthos via something like Dampening Sphere, right? Like they can still do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone bring in Dampening Sphere against me and it didn't do anything. Like even your Wolf Willow Haven's tapped for mana.
Right.
So it's just like, yeah, cool. Thanks for casting that card that doesn't do anything.
Right. Might hurt them more depending on what their game plan is.
But one of the issues that I have had, I mentioned, was Mono Blue Spirits, and that's been a frustrating matchup, especially in the powered down Explorer format. Like if you're trying to do ramp and Explorer, you're going to have a tough time against Spirits, just because it's stymieing your development, out-tempoing you. And that's a deck that you've been playing, right, Dave?
Yeah. So I think that if people hate Mono Green Devotion, with that kind of new best deck kind of passion, I think that people's hate of Mono Blue Spirits is not far behind.
Well, okay, hold on. Can we talk about those two decks, the way they're communicating with one another?
We're about to, yeah.
On the battlefield?
Yeah, because I feel like the reason Mono Blue is trending up right now is because it's so good against Mono Green. Because Mono Green is just like, it's vulnerable to counter magic. It doesn't really have tools against counter magic.
Yeah, I think it's two things. So for the record, we're moving on to our third topic here, everybody, if you're keeping track, which is Mono Blue Spirits and Pioneer. I think it's a bit of both. Like certainly part of the reason that it is popular is because it has a really good matchup against Mono Green Devotion. I also think Winota being gone, Spirits had a pretty tough time. Spirits wasn't fast enough to close against Winota either. So having the format be accessible to a deck that is good but not quite as speedy as that's still an assertive deck, has been helpful to that deck just by not being around anymore as well too. So I think it's a bit of both. But I do think that the fact that Mono Green being popular is a bigger reason for Spirits being popular than just it being a generally good deck. And it does have a good game plan against it because it has cheap counters that they can't really afford to wait to be able to cast into. And you can make them use their mana in ways that are not advantageous to them. I mean, the thing that it doesn't have, Mono Blue Spirits does not have a way to interact with like ramp creatures. Basically, it doesn't have a way to interact with like a, can't really kill a Llanowar elf all that easily, for example, but you can just kind of ignore it and kind of do your game plan. The other thing is that Mono Blue Spirits game plan doesn't rely on, but the card advantage engine that's in the Mono Blue Spirits deck is susceptible to creature removal, and there's not a ton of creature removal main deck in Mono Green's Devotion either. So if you get your Curious Obsession online, then you're probably going to draw a whole bunch of cards and then just bury them with the counter spells that you're drawing.
Yeah, that's the real issue. I mean, Mono Green lives in such fear of Mono Blue Spirits that like it's typically playing like 2 or 3 Skylashers these days, which is just like a 2/2 flash for 2 that has reach and pro blue and can't be countered. So like, I mean, there's some other, of course it does well against like Ledger Shredder and potentially like Crackling Drake or the little dragon thing, Sprite Dragon. But like, largely I think this is just like, I need to hedge against the up and coming Spirits deck.
Yeah. And I do think that actually is a problem for Spirits. Yeah. In my estimation. So I love the Spirits deck. I think that it's been interesting to see people starting to innovate on the form a little bit more. Mono Blue Spirits is a thing. We saw some Bant Spirits here and there over the last couple of weeks. Stan asked about that last time about, is Coco a good plan? Some people are having some success with it. You're also seeing some people who are playing Azorius Spirits right now, where really all that they're doing is adding Spell Queller to the mix and Imperial Eagle, so that you have extra lords. So basically you're trying to make your creatures have more creatures that you can attack with, even if it makes your disruption worse, because Spell Queller is worse disruption than Geistlight Snare or Mana Beak or any of or those kind of spells that you want to have access to too. But it does make you maybe be able to close games faster. And so if people are starting to play anti-blue disruption, maybe you're better off doing that. It also gives you access to some white sideboard cards, I noticed. I think the problem overall with Spirits is that it's the sideboard cards that you really have no way to interact with. Like, Spirits has very few ways to interact with a resolved creature. If you have a resolved creature that has protection from blue, and there's decent ones in Pioneer, there's Crashing Ceratops, there's Skylasher that Shane just talked about. There's a couple of other options that are in this space. You know, if people start bringing those cards in or start having them in their sideboards, it's really hard for blue to be able to do anything about them. So, you know, if you're not way ahead when someone plays Crashing Ceratops, you kind of just die.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should mention Spirit's problem with resolved creatures, because I think that's something the two decks have in common. And that's one of the reasons why blue can run away with the game against green, because sometimes all blue needs to get ahead is just have one flyer to turn on all of their conditional counter magic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Geistlight Snare is always pay 4, but you don't want to have to pay 3 for that effect. You really want to just pay 2 or
it's actually
1.
It's pay 3 is what it is. So Geistlight Snare is pay 3. Mana Beak is pay 4, but you know, that one always costs 2. Yeah. So I do think that Spirits is good, but I think that when Spirits is becoming so much of the meta, it's actually pretty easy to be hated out by the decks that want to be able to get around it, because its plan is sort of fragile. And so I do think that it's not a deck that I'm interested in playing a ton right now. I did a couple leagues with it over the weekend. I went 5-5, wasn't great. I know a lot of people are doing great with it right now, but it feels like in the leagues we might be on our way down a little bit. And there might be some other answers that we need to find to both mono green and what a good kind of tempo disruptive deck is for the moment. But as soon as people stop playing as much, you know, ghosts are going to pop back out when you least expect it, kind of.
Like when you turn your back on Boo the Ghost in Mario, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So creepy.
I really don't like that thing.
So why do you think people hate mono blue Spirits, though? I think some people just hate playing against it.
No one ever has had a spell countered and thought to themselves, "Yeah, I feel fine about that."
Yeah, that seems great.
Like, that was a fun experience for me.
I love when I cast something for 4 mana and my opponent counters it for 1 mana, because they always have Curious Obsession on a flyer and then
Geistlight Snare.
And then Geistlight Snare.
It's not so much that people hate Spirits. I think people just hate playing against counter spells. It's why, like, you'll go to the tournament practice room sometimes on Moto, and there'll be like those comments that are like, no counter spells, no planeswalkers, no black discard.
No black discard.
Is not, coloring is not drawing.
I mean, I think it's more than just the counter spells too. It's just the fact that because much of the deck operates at flash, and you have the ability to give everything flash when you have a Rattle Chains out, then you just are putting up a lot of stuff. Like, you always feel like you're using all of your mana, and then the opponent has to deal with like the false tempo or like legitimate real tempo that's gained from just you presenting the option to have counter spells. And then when you're drawing cards with Curious Obsession, you just always assume that they're drawing exactly what they need, because they always are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the Rattle Chains is such a big part of it too, because you can feel like you have a board that's doing nothing and you're just holding up counter spells where you're like, I have a Mausoleum Wanderer and a Rattle Chains. And then you get to the end of one turn where, you know, either the person not playing Spirits is really low on cards or whatever, and the Spirits person decides to go, okay, I'm going to play 2 Supreme Phantoms on the end of this turn, or 2 Mausoleum Wanderers, and then I'm going to drop Supreme Phantom next turn and just swing in for like 12 in the air. That can feel like it comes out of nowhere sometimes too, which is what's good about the deck. And honestly, I don't think that deck works at all without Rattle Chains. Really, it's so good.
Yeah.
As long as we're on the topic, can we talk about one more Pioneer deck in this Pioneer bonanza?
Yeah, that was what I was hoping. And we're going on to point number 4, and that is that I think humans might be underexplored in Pioneer. And I'm seeing a number of humans lists pop up in league dumps and elsewhere. This weekend on Saturday, Max Attack took a Bant list to 6th place in the challenge. And what these decks seem to be wanting to do is a lot of what other humans decks do in other formats, which is flood the board, cheap, efficient humans that have some kind of, frustration element with like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or Reflector Mage, and then they can sort of just beat down where they're keeping you off of your game plan and really stress your removal. And Extraction Specialist is a newer card that is showing itself to be versatile and cool. It works well with cards like Charming Prince, gets back stuff like Thalia's Lieutenant or another Charming Prince itself. There's a lot of variations of this deck. There's mono white versions that are really low to the ground. They're playing like some cheap interaction like Declaration Stone and some really sort of wide protection like Brave the Elements, or Obzon versions that go up a little bit higher on the curve, like they're doing like Archon of Emeria, Skycleave Apparition, Elite Spellbinder, hand disruption-y, board disruption-y type stuff. I've even seen ones that have like the Wasteland Strangler to process away the exiled cards into like Oblivion, and then removing something on the battlefield for more value.
Wow, that's a new one. That's very reminiscent of old. I mean, it's reminiscent of the old Eldrazian taxes kind of thing.
Like, I think what decks like these can do is a couple of things. They can threaten the mono blue decks, I think, because they can go wide and tall enough to match the board presence and race them. And so, like, you can't just be swinging in with all of your spirits and then have the humans crack back. And I think that they have enough disruption and aggression to also threaten mono green, especially with cards like Reflector Mage. Because, like, if you bounce a big green fatty and they're not able to recast it the next turn, then they might not have another thing to cast sometimes. Like, if you're kind of relying on like a single Cavalier of Thorns and it gets bounced, you're not that happy about it.
Yeah, I will say I've had pretty good luck on spirits against these humans decks so far. Now, I don't know if that's, it's not really empirical evidence, but I will say that the fact that they don't have a ton of ways to deal with flyers in the main deck.
So you think you're just racing them typically?
Yeah, and you can sort of like bounce one thing, and your counter spells can counter creatures in addition to spells, which is helpful too. And so you do a little bit of that, and then suddenly they're behind and kind of off you go. But post-board, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, like I think one thing that these decks are able to do is have a pretty flexible board plan, even though they might not run a lot of colors. Like, you can tech against green with things like Brutal Cathar, which takes advantage again of green's relative lack of interaction, where it's like, I just Brutal Cathar, and that card might be gone for the rest of the game. Or like, I've even seen Valorous Stance, which is a classic card that can remove creatures with 4 or more toughness, or give a creature indestructible, I believe is the other mode, for like 1 and a white. And yeah, so I think there's just options that these decks have, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more of like these aggro disruptive decks continue to increase in popularity, especially if that they're determining that they're able to stress these up and coming decks in the format in some way, especially if mono green is able to remain 15 to 20% of the competitive metagame or something like that.
I'll tell you, I hope that humans gets more popular, because that's like the exact type of matchup I want to see to whip out Is It Control. Because
like Anger of the Gods or something like that, or
but even like just like the 1 mana red spells, they're just like either Flame Blessed Bolt is fine, but the name is escaping me, but the one that has spell mastery and it hits a creature for 3 if you have 2 other instants and sorceries, like it's on the back of those
Fiery
spells
Impulse.
that I've had. Thank you. Yeah, so it's on the back of those spells that I've had decent success against the mono blue decks, and it's just like, give me as many creatures as possible, because if it's not Thing in the Ice that deals with them, it's going to be like this cheap removal.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is like some new S tier scourge of the format, but I'm saying, like, I think if you want to play a creature based deck like this that isn't spirits, like if you want to be doing more humans-y type aggression and like on the ground versus in the air, I think there's some options here to be checking out, and it might be worth digging through some leagues and even some challenge data to see what is piquing your interest.
I think it would be a lot cooler if it was S tier.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is. It's like Ryu in Street Fighter 2.
We should totally just start calling more decks S tier, whether or not they are. Maybe I'll start doing that in this episode.
I don't feel really comfortable using the term S tier, because I was never the type of game, like when I was playing games, S tier didn't exist. Okay, the concept of S tier was created by millennials, and I'm barely one of those. And so,
I thought it was created by Super Smash Brothers.
I never played Smash Brothers. That's a millennial game. I was playing Street Fighter 2 and Tekken 3, my friend.
I was
Anyway.
competing for quarters at Ms. Pac-Man, my friends. I don't know where you were, Shane, but
So I think we covered a lot of Pioneer, and I think it's probably time for the modern chapter, right? Or no?
actually we should bring up one of our other topics here, which is topic number 8. I'm going to promote to here because we are just about finished with Pioneer. And I guess my question is,
Oh yeah, this one.
I've been really enjoying Pioneer lately.
Why?
Explain yourself.
I think it's because you found a deck.
A deck?
You need at least a deck.
You found
But I
a
like-
deck.
Well, listen, here's the premise of this point. Stan doesn't like Pioneer, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why he doesn't like it. Now, I have a lot of decks that I've been enjoying Pioneer lately. I like Boros Prowess. I like Phoenix. I like Mono Blue Spirits. I like Rakdos Midrange. I've liked all of those different decks so far. Now, I'm not going to run out and rent Mono Green Devotion unless we do a dive down about it or something. But there's a lot of different decks that I've enjoyed because of the gameplay with those. And I think Shane is sometimes in the same boat. And I'm just surprised that you're not enjoying similar things, Stan.
Well, that's because I think the gameplay is actually bad.
Bad. I feel like this is Magic. Like I feel like, did you play a lot of like other formats before you got into Modern? Like I know you like Limited and stuff like that.
He used to play
played a lot-
Standard too.
Oh, I played a lot of Standard.
I feel like if you like Standard, this is literally just Standard.
Yeah, yes, that's why it's bad. Like, I'm telling you, the thing that I experience more often than not when I play a Pioneer League is that like I've had Standard formats that were more fun than this, and more than anything, it just feels like the metagame is like barely more diverse than some of the Standard formats that I've experienced, and that's what really bothers me. Is that it's just like the selection of cards is so narrow, and the selection of non-creature spells is just like so underpowered that I could get this experience from like a Standard format. What's the point of playing Pioneer, especially when like the cards that I like that actually like show like a hint of power end up getting banned?
Yeah.
Like Expressive Iteration is just a highly efficient spell. It's not like some overpowered combo piece. It's not a removal check that like forces deck building. It was just like really good at making other decks function more consistently. And that being too strong for the format is the type of condition that I'm not interested in participating in.
Yeah, like I think we're in agreement on a lot of this, which is like I like Pioneer quite a bit, and my primary issue with the format is what I've said before, which is like you have like a decent number of decks that are doing things that you're used to in other formats, or they're similar to each other, right? Like the aggro decks do Creature Swarm with some interaction because all the direct damage spells kind of stink. Like there's no burn deck. There's like a mid-range deck and a slightly bigger mid-range deck that work like every other mid-range deck you've ever played ever. Like there's the green ramp deck. The control decks play like control decks. Combo has largely been banned out of the format. We still have Lotus Fields around. And there's like only a couple, I think, interesting and decent novelty decks, like if you want to call them that, like Sacrifice and Greasefang, which have their own unique access and generate their advantage using like slightly different engines than the rest of the format. And then like what you said, Stan, it really made me think, it's like, compare this to like Con Standard, which is what some people consider like kind of an all-time great standard.
Yeah.
Like
That was the format that got me into Standard. It was
and like
a gold standard.
yeah, it's amazing.
You too?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were not around for cons. Okay.
Like
I was getting in toward the end of cons.
yeah, which is like a good time because like that's even more variety than the beginning of cons, I think. Like
Shane is about to tell us that we should be pining for Siege Rhino mirrors. Is that what you're about to say?
Like if you really look at the data, like Siege Rhino mirrors were not like the bulk of the gameplay. Like it was a smaller card pool, and there was actually, I think, more ways to play the game of Magic in the Standard set.
And I think you're speaking to something that is unintuitive, which is that it's not uncommon for smaller pools to generate more diversity.
Yeah, because like the powerful cards sort of crowd and ideas will crowd out like kind of weird niche cards. Like a card I always think about when I think about Con Standard was Whip of Erebos. And so Whip of Erebos was like this black artifact that would basically like snag a creature out of the graveyard. And
Siege Rhino. It grabbed Siege Rhino.
like it did eventually become, it went from Sidisi Whip to like 4-color Whip with Rhino, because why not? And so like that was just a card that is on zero people's radar right now, because it just doesn't, there's no reason to be playing a deck with Whip of Erebos. But because it could occupy a certain space in the metagame, people were able to use a cool piece of tech like that to play a deck that legitimately could be one of the best in the format, depending on how the rotation of decks inside the format were doing. And like, we just had decks like Jeskai Tempo that could be controlling or aggressive, or Gruul Monsters, which is just like your stompy deck, or like different kinds of Obzon midrange or Obzon aggro, or like Mardu midrange or Mardu Planeswalkers. And you had like Dimir Control with like Pearl Lake Ancient as your closer. And you had a combo deck and like Jeskai Ascendancy and heroic decks, which were like, aggressive, annoying combo creature decks. And like red aggro decks of various flavors, like where you could maybe be making a bunch of goblin tokens that are tapping for your Stoke the Flames.
That didn't exist then.
Oh, it did.
No.
That was like right after. That was like Fate Reforged, I think. But like those are 9 decks that I could like literally were good decks. Like they weren't just like, oh, some jank.
And then out of nowhere, someone like Segrist will show up to a GP and spike the whole thing within Soul when no one saw that deck coming at all.
Yeah, that's like what was that, M15?
Yeah, that was a little earlier than Cons, I think, or
no, that was after, because I hadn't played. I was not playing, and I saw that PT.
Yeah.
But like, so my argument here is like, there's 9 decks from Standard that played, I think, pretty differently and had ability to be tuned to be different, and had legitimately like strong reasons to be played over another deck in that rotation. And like Pioneer is like a format with way more cards and has like 10 pretty good decks to select from right now. But effectively, it doesn't even feel like they're as tunable or as malleable. They're like extremely solved. They're extremely stable. People aren't tweaking them anywhere near as often as they are in like a standard format. And like, it's just, you're kind of just doing what you did in like 7 years ago.
And I think on top of that, the power level delta between some of the decks and just like the rest of the iceberg makes it pretty insurmountable. So if you're trying to do something interesting, you will occasionally just have to resign to like losing to mono green and hoping you play any other matches.
Yeah.
But mono green being
like a gatekeeper.
In my opinion, just like far and away the best deck in the format right now, makes it unlikely that you're going to get to dodge it all that frequently.
Yeah. And so like one thing I do agree with you too is like Modern lets you.
Whoa. What are you agreeing with the two of us on?
No, well, the things
this
that you
is about
say,
me and Stan disagreeing about something.
Like, well, what you say in previous episodes, I'm saying is like Modern is just so different than what Pioneer or any other format offers. Like you're able to do more different things because of the card pool, because of the curation of the format. And that's just kind of what Modern's about. Like Modern's about doing stronger things that can play off each other in different ways. And sometimes they're not the ways that you want, but it's at least more interesting than a rehash of the same concepts that Magic has had for decades.
Wow, you guys are really yucking my yum here now.
Well, no, what I want to say is that like,
dude, all I played was Pioneer this week.
This is just and I mostly played Pioneer this week, but this is my subjective experience. And I want to be very clear about that. That's just like, given some options in Magic, I would just prefer to do something else. Is anything we're saying resonating with you? Or are you just having like the opposite subjective experience, which is like, true or not, I'm just having fun with this format and the cards and decks that I'm playing with and against.
And I think you can have fun.
Oh, that was a question.
I know,
for
but
me.
I'm just saying. Before you even go, I think you can. This is not me saying this is not fun, and that you should not be having fun.
Okay, I'm glad you got that out there. Now I won't. My fun lawyer won't sue you. A couple of things. I really think you overvalue the diversity of con standard. Like I don't think it was all these decks were not that good. They really weren't.
But
They really
none of the decks were that good.
we're not gonna re-legislate 2015 or whatever that was, 2014, but they weren't all that good. I do think that I'm just having the opposite subjective experience. I think the big thing is like it's kind of a nice break from Modern for me. Sometimes playing Modern feels like my job, and this is kind of a new thing. And also I am liking not like I see what's coming in Pioneer more easily, even for all the matches and rounds of Modern that I play. Everything is so efficient in Modern that sometimes it's kind of like, oh, you're just going to get hammered by whatever card your opponent plays. And that doesn't happen quite as much in Pioneer, I feel like right now. At least I have a couple of times where I can interact or I can do things. Simple card advantage plays work out a little bit better in Pioneer, I think, than they do in Modern sometimes. I don't know. I'm enjoying the slightly slower pace, I guess, is what it is.
No, I'm there with you on that too, which is like I don't like effectively losing on like turn 3 or even earlier sometimes in Modern, right? Where it's like I do feel like we can develop into a game plan. I just wish that
hold on.
I just wish that they
Guys.
had not banned combo out of existence so aggressively, honestly.
We were just talking about how like mono green can play a card that mono blue will never beat. And multiple cards, like these like
I mean, it can go around it. It can go
Well,
around.
Yeah, but that's because that deck is actually not that good. Mono blue, unfortunately. Like, I love that deck, but when there's too much of it. But that's the thing. It's a meta game shift there. And yeah, but there's cards like that in Modern too. So to be like,
sure,
oh yeah, you're never going to recover
like
from
that are punishing the most degenerate strategies. Like if someone is doing like a Force of Negation or a Surgical or Test of Talents against like a Cascade deck, that's because the Cascade decks are doing something a little too powerful and they need to have like these surgical answers. When you have a surgical answer against a totally fair, like board-based, like mid-rangey aggro deck in Pioneer, that to me feels horrible.
Yeah. I still think that there's time that you can close a game out, though. Sometimes where if they play it too late, if they, I just think there's more time to do stuff, which I am enjoying right now. That's what I'm mostly saying about Pioneer.
Good.
Yeah.
It's just to be enjoyed.
I love seeing you happy, Dave. Like the way the corners of your eyes crease a little bit when you're smiling, like it's just it's very cute.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not down on Modern. It is kind of like I'm tired of people talking about 4-color, which we're going to do in a minute too.
Can't wait.
But it just feels like there's a lot of new stuff to play with, and I like playing in a format where Fable the Mirror Breaker is good in lots of things and yada yada yada. So,
all right, you guys want to take a quick break? We can get into the old smell commercial, and then we'll come back and finish up with some more takes on Magic. Hey guys.
Yo, Shane.
So I just wanted to we're of course in part brought to you by Barrister and Mann, fine purveyor of shaving soaps, body soaps, scents, shaving lotions, all that kind of good stuff to make you feel good, smell good, enjoy life in general. And I wanted to talk about my scent of the week. The one that I actually wanted to talk to you about was Passiflora. Unfortunately, Passiflora looks like it's sold out for the season. So I'm going to talk to you about something that I love almost as much as Passiflora, and that is Waves. Okay? And so this is just a commercial for Waves. Waves is dope because it is a...
Is this just a commercial for Oceans?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought you meant the band, that like chill wave band from 2008.
Chill Wave.
You know what's funny?
Chill Wave.
It's right now.
King of the Beach. They're good. I've seen them live.
Dude.
With the sun, with my eye, I'm gonna burn my eyes out. All right, get at us, Waves.
Love Waves, get at us. So anyway, Waves, I love Waves. Waves is like this amazing sort of like light aquatic. It's almost like a cologne type smell. I think the shaving soap is great, but then that kind of goes away. But I think the killer part of the Waves combo is the aftershave, and it's like the aftershave splash, and that is very cologne-like without being overpowered at all. It kind of fades somewhat quickly. What's wild about the aftershave, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Stan, is like usually aftershave just kind of hurts your skin, right? And what I love about Barrister and Man, what Will's doing over there is it feels good on your face. Like it feels like it's toning, it feels like it's, calming, it's moisturizing. And that is just a great aspect for something after you have shaved, where it's like, somehow I'm smelling good and it's not hurting my face and it's making me feel better. So anyway, that's what I would recommend if you wanted to check something out new. You haven't purchased waves before. You kind of like an aquatic scent. Go over to Barrister and Man, MANN. Check out the selection of smells there. If you don't want waves, there's certainly something else for you. And you can use coupon code TheDiveDown15 for 15% off your first order. Thanks.
So that was a whole hour almost of Pioneer material, and it was great and exciting. Let's talk a little bit about Modern. Dave, you said we don't have a breakdown, but you have a section that is breakdown-esque for us. Was there an important Modern event over the weekend that you wanted to mention?
There was the Season 1 Magic Online Championship Series. The Mox or Showcase or whatever the S stands for there was this weekend. This was the final of it, where they have 8 people play against each other in Vintage Cube and in a 8-person pod for Constructed. The format was Modern.
The weirdest format ever. Like the 2 3-0s make it to the finals.
Yeah, and the coolest thing about it, though, is that these people love to metagame against each other because they're all almost always well-known Magic Online grinders. I'm not going to go through every player. I'm very sorry about that. The 2 players who were in the finals were X-Whale, Will Kruger, local to Chicago, and also McWinsauce, Tom White, who I believe lives in the UK. But I did want to talk, it was a small field, but I thought that there were some interesting things that we could talk about and maybe learn a little bit about Modern right now. There were 4 4-color decks out of the 8 pilots. 4 people brought that. There were 2 Traverse the Uhlenwald builds with main deck Emrakul. So those are decks that I think are looking for the right piece at the right time to metagame against 4-color as well. There was one version that was a little bit more down the middle, as you would expect, 4-color with Ella Damri's Call. And then one of the Risen Reef models. So there was a full-on Elementals version, or what I guess we would call a full-on Elementals version. One of the most interesting things I saw in relation to this was someone on Reddit, best in WPB, don't know them super well, but they kind of put a point on something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is, we've been talking lately, 4-color is the best deck for any given weekend over 16 people, and it's not close. In my opinion, 4-color is just one engine, Red and 6 Teferi Omnath plus Solitude, and a second engine of your choice for the mirror/non-mirror, think Risen Reef, Ephemerate, etc. It's all the same deck. You're just choosing a different matchup spread. And I think that is kind of what's going on with 4-color. We've looked at lists over the last 3 or 4 weeks and gone, well, I wonder why this person's trying, why is Risen Reef back suddenly? And then why was one group of people a couple weeks ago playing Bring to Light with Scapeshift as an option in their 4-color deck? And then why are some people sticking with the stock list and starting to put things like Emrakul, Promised End in? It's all because they're trying to metagame against each other. And so this is kind of what's going on in 4-color right now, is the tech where people are trying to level up on top of each other to exploit the other 4-color pilots.
Which is especially something you want to be doing in an 8-person tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with people that and maybe their tendencies. I do think that there's probably a better chance to do well if you figure out what everybody's going to be playing and pick something that does better. And so I think that what the other two people brought, or other 4 people brought, broke down into 2 lists, and I thought that this was interesting. So the people who decided not to play the quote-unquote best deck, or a teched version of the quote-unquote best deck, they decided not to play 4-color in Modern. 2 people decided to play Titan Shift, including X-Whale, who was one of the finalists, and the other 2 people decided to play Grixis Ledger Shredder, which is basically Shadow, with Ledger Shredder instead. Not instead, but in addition to Shadow. And McWinsauce, who was one of the other finalists, was piloting that into it. And I believe that McWinsauce was the 3-0 coming out of the pod. So Grixis Ledger Shredder was the 3-0. So what do you think? interesting choices. Were you surprised that those two showed up? Titan, Wish, Shift?
I think the guess that no one would bring Murktide is kind of astute, where it's like, yeah, Murktide's like a good deck, but 4-color likely gives people better play and better chance to sort of maybe tune the 4-color to out-tech the other four colors. And so just kind of going from the outside being like, I want to dodge Murktide, I'm going to stomp 4-color and bring Titan Shift, seems pretty astute to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there's been this, people have been asking, where's the combo deck that was helping keep 4-color down for a while? For a long time, people felt like Belcher was helping keep 4-color down for a while, and that's sort of disappeared. I think in some part, people think it's because of Boseiju, but also because it's an uncounterable trigger, basically. And so if they have it, you're dead. But I think that there's a chance that there's some new combo deck out there that does some kind of uninteractive, unfair stuff. Now, maybe it's not Titan Shift with Wish because that's too susceptible to a broader metagame. And in fact, Will Kruger said on Twitter that he wouldn't even play this deck in an open field tournament because it's so susceptible to counter spells out of things like Murktide and things like that. I mean, Andrea Mangucci did 5-0 with it today and was super excited about it on Twitter after doing so. And so I don't know, maybe people are,
former world champion Andrea Mangucci did well with the deck? Huh.
Did well with it and was excited about it.
Oh, you don't
I love
say.
his excited life. Yeah, everything's great. So I do think twofold. So one is I think you're going to see people trying this deck out in leagues. So keep an eye out for it because that is what people are likely to do, is pick up something that was popular and kind of off meta, even if it's bad for a little bit. But the other thing is there might be a combo answer out there that's good in a broader meta game that can help keep 4-color down, I guess, without having to ban something, without having to do something else in the format like we talked about last week. You know, I don't know if there's a Cascade deck perhaps that might be better against it. I've seen people talking about that. I've seen people talking about Indomitable Creativity starting to be good against 4-color as well. Again, maybe there's some options that we haven't thought about that are still possible to arise.
But wasn't your initial point about how all these 4-color decks are the same, but you just adjust a handful of cards to determine your matchup spread? Doesn't that challenge what you're also saying in terms of like maybe there's a combo deck that can deal with it? Because I think
I don't know, maybe.
Because I think if you're playing a 80-card Urian deck that has like, 4 or 5 of the strongest cards in the format, period, and then can play any other cards in practically any colors, like you'll find an answer.
Yeah, probably. I also think that a lot of those moves are about each other. They're about trying to pick what everybody else is on and having the better version of 4-color that beats 4-color is almost as important to those people now as the other rogue decks. But yeah, probably.
And I also think like one of the real issues is that Murktide just kind of can control a bunch of the decks that 4-color can't. And so like having a deck that is rogue or combo-y or something like that can take care of both those decks seems like the real challenge, right?
Seems like a format defining strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we take expressive iteration away from both of them and see how happy they are.
Let's do
it. Dave, do me a favor.
We're not bringing that up yet. All right. So the other deck that I thought was interesting was Shadow, which we've talked about a number of times, but both of the pilots who had it, Kodaman, MTG, and McWinsauce had lists that were close to each other, but McWinsauce even went even farther into metaing his deck. And he played, one interesting thing was, like a week before the tournament, he posted on Twitter and said, I played this 75 that Soul Strong had played. Mulligan to 5 every game in 3 rounds. I don't know how people play this deck. My submission for the Mox is in 2 days and I'm lost. I don't know what to do. And then he ended up registering Shadow and won with it, basically. Won the Swiss part anyway. X-Whale actually won the tournament. But the thing that was interesting about what happened with this deck is, first off, Tom was playing 2 Turoks main, which was fascinating, I think. And of course, that's a meta choice made just for a small meta where you expect a bunch of 4C because it's one of the best cards against 4-color. Yep. So moving Terminate to the side in order to have one of your best threats in the main, I think makes a ton of sense. Not a move I would recommend trying for wide tournaments unless you really want to try one Turok or something like that. But I think that the deck's probably going to be better with your Terminates main, or at least one Terminate main. So when you don't die to game one Murktide every time. So I wouldn't try that part. The other thing that's super interesting is that there's no Inquisition of Kozilek's in these decks anymore. It's just 4 Thoughtseize for hand disruption,
Man.
and that's it. And I think some of that has to do with the discussion that's been going around lately. Michael Raff wrote an article about how Thoughtseize and discard is kind of bad in Modern right now because the cards are too good. I think it's starting to bear out in the decks that used to run a lot of them, or they're not anymore.
Yeah, I can almost understand playing Grixis for some of the black cards, but I'm looking at Tom White's deck and like the Thoughtseize are just glaring at me.
Yeah.
Like, I like the Drown in the Lock. I like the Kroxa. Definitely love the Turok. Like, but playing Thoughtseize against the deck that's just going to like cast an Omnath, like, what's the point? I don't get it.
The only point is to enable Death Shadow to get bigger faster. That's
Okay.
it. If you didn't lose 2 life from it, you wouldn't play it anymore.
I see. That makes. But why not just play Street Wraith?
Good question. Maybe you could. Well, some of it has to do with Gigantha being better than Street Wraith, and you can't play Street Wraith and have Gigantha. But that's certainly a question.
Checks out.
That's the only reason. And then the last thing that I thought was super interesting about his list, and this is like the dumbest little thing, is on Twitter afterwards, Tom said, hey, it was Soul Strong's idea. He coached me a little bit, got me prepared for this tournament. He said, let's put Turok main. But he said, my deck also has 20 lands in it. And people who play Death Shadow with 18 lands, I don't know how you do it. Don't do that. And I love that, actually, because, God, there's been so many times when I'm playing Shadow where I'm just like, we're at 18 lands now. Oh, we're at 17 lands now. We're just going lower and lower. He was just like, no. I'm going back to 20. Let's do it this way. He ended up cutting one Kroxa and 1 DRS even for it, Dragon's Rage Channeler, and I think it's probably fine.
DRC, Dave.
DRC,
and you just really want Death Rage Shaman, don't you?
I do. I just keep saying that.
Yeah.
Isn't Channeler a shaman? Is Channeler at least a
It is
type
a shaman.
human shaman? Well,
It
see, that's
is a
just throwing me
shaman.
off there.
There you go.
I mean, this is another case where like those extra lands can be fiery islets, right? Like you can use a utility land that can give you a little extra velocity or help enable your Death Shadow too.
Yeah. Whenever they finish this cycle, those Horizon Land cycle, and we get the red black one, Shadow's going to change its mana base completely, because that's what you really want. It's the red black Horizon Land essentially. But so I thought that was interesting to see some little tweaks there. And Stan, you've been playing some Modern though.
Oh yes. So I've been playing 2 different combo decks, and these are points 7 and 8. I'll just kind of transition between them.
Combo deck? You wouldn't say combo decks might be good right now?
I didn't.
Weird.
I didn't say that they were good yet.
I said might.
Okay.
I said might.
All right. So the first one I tried was Calibrated Blast. I had mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I had faced off against it when I was on. I was doing a league with Blue White Control. Got paired up against Calibrated Blast. Was like embarrassed by it. Like it just wrecked me, and I was like, this deck is good. Why aren't more people playing Calibrated Blast? It's 3 mana, deal 15, and then 5 mana, deal 15 again. And I realized that hey, it's not that simple. So Calibrated Blast was not as impressive as I thought it was once I actually played with it. The biggest issue for me was that Blue White Control might actually be its like best matchup, and my experience was maybe colored a little bit by that relationship. But when I was playing in a field with Hand Disruption, a Murktide, which is just like full of counter magic, along with like really good threats, Hand Disruption, and then also like the Cascade decks that have living or Force of Negation, those ended up being a huge problem. In fact, my first match when I fired up a Calibrated Blast League was against Living End, which, friend of the show, Kilgore Trout, who's been on this deck as well, kind of warned me, like, beware of the Cascade decks because of Force of Negation. Like, I saw that immediately. Just Force of Negation exiling the spell felt like a huge setback. And Cascade being such a significant pillar of the format right now made me feel like Calibrated Blast isn't necessarily going to exploit a metagame, so to speak, at least not in its current build. I'll also say that Calibrated Blast can sometimes whiff, right? So like it's three mana, find a card, deal damage based on the card's CMC. Sometimes your Calibrated Blast will just find another Calibrated Blast, and then you're paying 3 to deal 3 to your opponent, and then you feel like you are losing forever.
You almost certainly are losing forever at that point. Yeah.
You should just drop from the league.
The other thing to say real quick too, just so people remember, Force Negation exiles the spell that it counters, right? The reason that's extra big for Calibrated Blast is because Calibrated Blast has flashback.
Thank you.
And so often if you get countered when you're playing Calibrated Blast, you get a chance to do it again.
Yeah. And also, like, if they Force of Negation the Throes of Chaos, that hurts too, because Throes of Chaos has retrace. So like sometimes you feel like you've got a nice leg up because you're just going to start pitching your lands. This deck has 38 lands. So just you'll keep pitching lands to Throes of Chaos, but if they hit it with force, then you can't do that either.
Yep.
And to make matters worse, the plan B is kind of crappy. One of the interesting things about this deck, like not only is it running a ton of lands, it's running enough Triumphs that it can play Scion of Draco, and will just sometimes, like, you can cast your Draco for 2, 3, or 4 mana. But then it's just like a 4/4 flyer, and that's not necessarily great in most matchups because you can't really protect that 4/4 flyer. So once that's answered, you aren't really doing anything, and oftentimes you're just drawing a ton of lands, and it feels like unless you have a really strong opener, you can't necessarily rely on the top of your deck to win you games.
Yeah. You're not casting Shadow Mortality really either, are you?
I don't think so. Usually because like one Shadow of Mortality is castable because your life total is low enough. You're so far behind that whoever you're playing against can usually close out the game before just like a vanilla 7/7 can do anything meaningful.
Does anything. Yeah, absolutely.
The neatest thing about this deck, I will say, that like I didn't actually appreciate until I played with it, is the desert cards, and just like being able to play the desert Sunscorched Desert, because like at ETBs it pings your opponent for 1. Like playing a few of those and then some Ramanap Ruins makes it feel like you can just dome your opponent for 15 off of a Calibrated Blast, and then your deserts will do the rest of the damage.
Right.
That's a little bit of Christmas land, but I think that's the thinking for playing all these desert cards in this deck.
Absolutely. You're trying to get damage from wherever you can. You're trying to get that last 5 damage from wherever you can, basically.
Exactly. Now, on the other hand, next point, I played a different combo deck with a different Modern Horizons 2 card that no one really talks about. The card is Glimpse of Tomorrow. The deck is something that Ryan Donkin tweeted about over the weekend. This is a Elementals Cascade combo deck with Glimpse of Tomorrow.
No. No.
So this is an absolute abomination.
This is a pretty big update from the deck that's been floating around for a while, right? Like they swapped out some cards, put in some more expensive cards in a deck that was kind of fringy, and now we're suddenly like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And when you say expensive, you mean dollars, not mana value.
Correct. Yeah, money.
And the reason they're more expensive is because they're good castable, playable cards to begin with.
Right.
So what this deck is doing is it's trying to create a lot of permanence on the board to set up a Glimpse of Tomorrow. For those who don't remember, it's a suspend sorcery. It has no mana cost. Suspend 3, red. Shuffle all permanents you own into your library. That includes lands. Then reveal that many cards from the top of your library. Put all non-aura permanents revealed this way onto the battlefield. End of line. So what this deck does is like you play cards like Colony Garden to make some 0/1s. You play cards like Wave Sifter to make some clue tokens. You play Risen Reef just to like have velocity. And then eventually you cast the Glimpse of Tomorrow. Either you can suspend it. I never did. Ideally, you're cascading into it off of your 4 Violent Outburst or your 4 Shardless Agent. And then you're, playing whatever the next like 6, 8, 10 cards off the top of your library are. This deck, unlike the previous one I mentioned, is nuts. I don't know if it's like the new Elementals deck or the new Cascade deck, but this actually just like felt powerful out of the box for me because Risen Reef plus Omnath plus like whatever other elementals you happen to cast, in this case it's usually like Fury or Endurances, you just like create an insane board presence. And then usually just like run over your opponent because your Omnaths either gained you enough life to cushion you against your opponent's plan, burned your opponents for 4 damage enough times, drew you some cards, let you cast all these extra cards that you're drawing off of your Risen Reefs too, and then like some 3/3 double strikers or some 3/2 flying wave sifters will usually just do the trick. I don't know. I thought this deck was insane. Ryan tweeted that he went 10-0 in leagues with it. Oh, by the way, Dave, it plays for Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Oh yeah, I saw. Wonderful.
Yeah. I played a lot of practice matches and then I started a league. I haven't finished the league yet, but I'm 2-1 in that league. So
Nice.
we've almost paid for it.
Just a little bit sooner, you can get the burrito soon.
Yeah, I mean, like we don't talk about practice room as reasonable, like practice
Results.
beyond just knowing what a deck can do with its cards. But I was undefeated there. And then once I went in the
Nice.
league, like I actually faced some real competition, but then I also beat some real competition. So I think this is just like a fun way to play Omnath and Elementals without feeling like you're doing like the stupid Teferi Renin 6 Urian stuff that, from what I hear, isn't even that fun to play with.
You want to know something funny? I have this deck except for Violent Outburst and 2 Cavern
What?
Souls.
The Cameron's being reprinted, David.
Yeah, I know, but I have every other card in this deck already. That would be maybe this will be the Cascade deck that I have since I don't have any Cascade deck.
So yeah, I'm excited to finish this league. And I just like, I'm not a big combo player, I think you guys know, but every once in a while I like trying out like a new random combo deck.
You play Rhinos, that's a combo deck.
You've been pretty into Cascade the last few months. You were playing Living End, you've been playing Rhinos, you're playing this. Like I think you're having a moment. I'm not going to say that I think of you as a combo player, but I think you're having a moment in Modern at least.
I just always love trying combo decks because I want to see like when something actually good rolls around. And I also like understanding when and how combo decks are punished and what they're vulnerable to. Because like eventually a new Splinter Twin deck is going to come around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
This is why you don't like
just,
Pioneer, Stan. You want to do
Oh,
stuff
'cause
like
combos
this.
Yeah, but I hate all the combo decks. And like I never enjoyed Inverter. I never enjoyed Lotus Field. Like Storm/Lotus Field decks actually I find really mentally taxing. Like I don't want to actually cast 10 or 20 spells in a turn. I just want to cast like 3 or 4 spells every turn.
Yeah, it's a good amount.
That make 30 permanents. That's what you want.
Well, in this case, you cast 1 spell and then you make 30 permanents and you're just
Right.
like managing your triggers. Like that's the craziest thing about this last deck that I mentioned, the Glimpse deck, is just like you'll sometimes like flip a bunch of Colony Garden tokens and a bunch of Clue tokens, and then you'll produce 30 Risen Reef triggers because you flip into a few of them and several other elementals, and then you're just like
Right.
auto yielding as many as you can.
Right. Yeah, this is, I mean, you mentioned Jason. This is another deck that Jason plays a lot. He really loves these kind of fringe-ish but powerful combo decks in Modern.
Like
I know
hipster
that-
decks.
Yeah, they are kind of hipster decks, and I think he really liked this one too, and so it's interesting to see it start to get a little bit more attention from Ryan Donkin, well-known player, was really known for playing a lot of Adnos for a while.
A very successful Adnos player.
All right, last couple categories to talk about. 2 quick. So number 9. It's been 1 year since Modern Horizons 2 came out.
It's been 1 year since
1 year
Horizons
since
2 came out.
2 came out.
I don't know if we're gonna if we might go back and do a retrospective about like how much Modern has changed since
Naval
Modern
gaze
Horizons
for a
2.
while.
Something like that. But I did want to talk about one thing. Since I've been home, I can't do anything. I have been sorting a bunch of cards and managing my collection lately. I have this system where, I have cards that are logged into Goldfish that I'm keeping track of. They're in my collection. They're in boxes. They're in order, so I can always find them, blah, 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 blah. And then I have boxes that just have the other stuff in them. And so what I've been doing a little bit is going through and finding cards that really shouldn't be in the collection anymore because they're not played anymore. And I'm moving them into my kind of like just other stuff that I'll find someday if I have to, but I'm not going to worry about it if I can't ever find them. 2 cards that I moved out of here that made me sad, in part because of Modern Horizons 2, but also just because I think Modern is passed and by and they're not going to get played anywhere else. The first one was Burst Lightning, which is just a card that used to come up sometimes. Cool card, it's a shock, or if you pay that kicker cost, it's a 4 damage spell instead. No big deal. It is what it is. But the one that really kind of broke my heart was moving my playset of Magmatic Sinkhole from Modern Horizons 1 out and into my bulk area, basically, because there's no way that card is ever coming back. It's never coming back thanks to Unholy Heat. Unholy Heat is just so much better. And I wanted to know, do you have any fringe but beloved cards that were good and modern that aren't anymore?
You ever hear of some cards called Stinkweed Imp and Golgari, Thug and Creeping Chill, and oh wait, that's just the entire deck of Dredge. And every time I unsleeve or I unbox a deck, and it's just well, there goes humans, there goes Dredge back into the boxes of cards. I feel like I've got to pour one out.
Yeah, fair. Although Dredge still comes up, maybe humans someday.
I mean,
we'll get some Thalia decks again, but we'll see.
I don't think they're ever going to be at the power level without some new printings, of course. But even then, just who knows? Yeah, but this is definitely a sore point for me. It's just sad to see a card that you felt was doing something novel. Usually it's a common or an uncommon that has a certain power level, and then just gets replaced whole cloth or is no longer even part of a viable strategy.
Yeah. Stan, anything come to mind for your pet cards?
Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, jeez.
Dark Confidant.
Too real.
Yeah.
Bob is for sale.
Yeah. The fact that Snapcaster Mage, it's cute that Waffle still plays in Blue Eye Control. You know what I mean? I wonder how much of that. Yeah, I wonder how much of that is just Waffle being such an old school player and not wanting to give it up. It's still obviously a powerful card, but it's just I feel the format has passed it by in such a significant way that
you're paying for your spells. What are you doing?
Yeah,
right.
It's just it's just not about interacting in the way that Snapcaster Mage enables.
Yeah,
and that's what it is.
Part of that might also even be just because Lightning Bolt isn't what it used to be.
Right. Huge part of it.
Also because of Unholy Heat too.
Right.
But Magmatic Sinkhole, how significant was that card?
I mean, it was the best way for mono red decks or red heavy decks to be able to kill a planeswalker
or
for cheap. Yeah. Or a large creature. Yeah. So I think it was a useful card. It was just setting the power level at a certain place, and we just blew right by it, But that's it. So RAP for a couple of cards. Maybe we'll come back and talk more about, with charts and pivot tables, modern MH2's impact. But that's all for now. And then Stan, we have one last thing that is sort of a promo for you, but maybe is a bit of a take.
Always be promoting.
Always be promoting. So I was very flattered to be invited to join someone else's stream. It's actually happening this week. By the time this episode comes out, the stream will have happened already. On Wednesday night, Brainstorm Brewery invited me to be on their Wednesday night Commander stream.
How'd you manage that?
Someone nominated me on Twitter, and I said, yes, I want to do
whatever.
I
remember that.
Whatever Brainstorm Brewery wants me to do, I will do it. That's what you say to those guys.
Within reason.
Ray, if someone asks if you're a god, say yes.
Yeah. Don't buy a bunch of copies of Seance or something like that if they tell you to, but do go on their stream.
Yeah. So, for that reason, I polished up my go-to commander deck, which is a Grixis Wizards spell casting control deck with Kess, Dissident Mage. And in polishing that deck, I actually realized that the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate set had some decent reprints that brought down the value of, you guessed it, Commander cards. And I just wanted to give like a really quick shout out to cards like Reflecting Pool. Like that was an expensive card. That's the Baldur's Gate version is under $10, and Reflecting Pool occasionally sees modern play. Like it's a pretty good pickup right now. But even in terms of more Commander specific cards, like the Luxury Suite, Bountiful Promenade, the cards that check how many opponents you have.
The Battle Bond duels. Yeah.
The Battle Bond duels. Yeah. They used to be pretty expensive, above $20. Now they're hovering like right around or even below $10. So if you're a Commander player, even an occasional Commander player, say you have one Commander deck and you want to juice it up a little bit with some better lands, now's the time to pick those up if they were reprinted in the Baldur's Gate set. Even stuff like Lightning Greaves, Herald's Horn, Mutavault, Skull Clamp, Jessica's Will, like these are Commander staples that I just realized like now's actually a decent time to pick them up if for some reason you don't have a copy of Skull Clamp from all the Commander precons that have come out over the years.
Yeah. But the big thing here is go back and watch the stream if you can see it on a VOD of Stan on Brainstorm Brewery playing Commander.
How long do these games go for? Are they fast? What's the power level? Is it what's level? Is it level 0?
The turn 0 rules? Yeah, we haven't had that conversation yet.
I'm going to start asking people that when I show up to Modern FNM. So I'm going to be like, "What power level is your deck?" Mine's like a 4. Mine's 8 whack. Is that cool?
My mental power level is also a 4 in terms of modern play.
Yeah, I only play red decks, red prowess. That's it.
Yeah, so I think if it's not on the Twitch VOD, it might end up on YouTube, though I think YouTube is reserved for mostly the podcasts. So check out the Twitch VODs. Hopefully it'll be there after the fact. It looks like they keep all their videos there. I'll tweet about it, of course. And
you gotta tweet.
But to answer your question, how long these games go, I'm hoping they go long for the sake of just because I'm going to ask them a million questions about them as Magic players. Like I'm just going to do like the bonus ep treatment just because I'm so fascinated with these guys. They've been podcasting for so long within Magic that I'm mostly just excited to like be in the same room with them. And the fact that I have to play Commander is a pill that I will swallow.
Speaking of Commander, I've been noticing as the spoilers for Double Masters roll on that this is much less of a modern reprint set than I originally hoped.
Yes.
And it is a Commander reprint set because Commander moves packs.
Crazy. Remember when Double Masters came out and Tron was on sale?
Yeah, like a bunch of stuff just was like, we had like a whole episode about here's what to buy.
Modern on sale. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have that same kind of episode. Maybe like a segment, but
I don't think so.
Well, we'll see. Once we have the full Double Master spoiler, we'll look at potentially doing a value up on that. But for now, I think that wraps up this week's episode.
An hour 45, we did it.
Yeah, the final cut might even be under an hour 40.
Oh man, let's get there.
Let's hope this works. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a rating and review. If you use Spotify, just a rating will do. If you'd like to reach out to us, submit a question, get in touch in any way, you can tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word. You can also email thedivedown@gmail.com. As always, you can support the show over on Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can even support the show while playing Magic with a promo code, thedivedown15. Gets you 15% off your first 2 months of a Mana Traders rental account. Get better at Magic by playing more combo decks. That's what I've been trying to do. You can also smell good while playing Magic with some of the products over at Barrister and Man. Use that same promo code, thedivedown15, to get 15% off your first order from Barrister and Man. You're going to like the way you smell. I'm certain of it. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and record shorter podcasts.